Tonight we continue with the voices of the Passion. Simon Peter, the disciple with cold feet. Our text is from Matthew 26. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came to him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the Galilean." But he denied it before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you are talking about." When he went out to the porch, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again, he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you." And then he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know the man." And at that moment, the cock crowed. And then Peter remembered what Jesus had said. "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Did you ever feel that you just wanted to crawl under a rock and hide because you were so embarrassed and so ashamed? That was me. How ironic that it was me, because I am Peter, the rock, the big fisherman, the one who was always supposed to be strong. Yet in a moment of crisis, I had cold feet. It began when we gathered in the upper room on Thursday night to celebrate the Passover. I thought that this would be the last time we would celebrate the Passover like this. For the next time would surely be the time when Jesus would come in the midst of his kingdom in all its glory. That is why I was so surprised when he wanted to wash my feet. Why would he ever want to do that? I ought to be washing his feet. He was my Lord and Master. He was going to be in charge of this new and glorious kingdom, not me. Yet he insisted I could not be part of his kingdom if he did not wash my feet. Of course, I consented. And then, after supper, we went to the Garden of Gethsemane. It had been a grueling week. We were tired, and Jesus went off by himself to pray. And the rest of us fell asleep. When suddenly we were awakened by a band of intruders. In the flickering light of their torches, I could see that they were armed with swords and clubs. I recognized some of the faces. Some were for the Sanhedrin. And believe me, they had not come to pray with us. And then I saw him. It was Judas. He was one of them. And he slowly stepped forward as if to greet Jesus, and then suddenly kissed him on the cheek. Judas had come to betray Jesus into the hands of these thugs. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. There was confusion and yelling and people pushing and shoving, and fists began to fly. It was a street brawl. I certainly was not going to sit back and let them do this to Jesus. After all, I was Peter, the rock, the big fisherman. So I grabbed the sword and started slashing and struck the slave of the high priest on his ear and cut it off. Yes! Let the bloodshed begin. But then Jesus did something utterly odd. He commanded us to put down our weapons. Should there not be weapons in his kingdom? Doesn't he want the power of the sword? Here I thought that he should have commended me for my deed of heroism. But now he puts me down for being out of line. And then he heals the ear of this thug who had come to hurt him. I don't get it. This is not what the Messiah, who would restore King David's kingdom in all its glory, would do. They bound Jesus, hauled him off. Stunned and confused, I followed the entourage as they led Jesus to the house of the high priest Caiaphas. Oh, it sure looked like the Sanhedrin was having an emergency meeting. What were they going to do to Jesus? I stood outside in the courtyard, warming myself by the fire. The bystanders were abuzz, just like the whole city was. Thousands of pilgrims had come to celebrate the Passover for the last 3 weeks. Last week, Jesus had stirred them up. And now Jesus, with a very public arrest, a crowd gathered outside Caiaphas' house. And the talk in that crowd was all about Jesus. You could just see the fear and suspicion in their eyes. My heart started to pound. I was terrified. What if they found out who I was? What if they found out if I was one of Jesus' disciples? 3 times I was questioned, and 3 times I was accused of being one of his followers. And 3 times I denied ever having known who Jesus was. And then I heard the cock crow. It was only a cock crowing, but it might as well have been a crowd screaming and pointing their fingers at me. For I suddenly remembered what Jesus had said in the upper room. Before the cock crows, I would deny him 3 times. At the time, I protested vehemently, but his words have come true. And then the doors of Caiaphas' house opened, and out came the guards with Jesus, his hands bound like some common criminal. I don't know where they are going, but in the low light of the fire, I could see his face. And I will never forget that face. He looked at me, and he looked right through me. He knew what I had done. Peter, the rock, the big fisherman, the big shot, had crumbled in his hour of testing. This should have been my moment to shine, but I got cold feet and crumbled. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I ran off into the darkness of the night where I could hide, and Tears flowed down my face. The shame gripped my heart. How could I have done this? I never did see Jesus again that night. I was too ashamed to let him see me again. But I heard how they led him off to Golgotha and crucified him, and there he died like a common criminal. Perhaps if I had not let him down, it could have been different. In his greatest hour of need, I was a hopeless, spineless coward, a weakling, worried only about my own skin. I got cold feet and ran. He has been dead now for a day. Those who saw him die reported that even in the midst of his suffering, he said something unbelievable. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Even at the end, Jesus could not bring himself to hate his enemies. He still forgave them. If he could forgive them, then maybe he could forgive me. I wasn't there. I was too much of a coward. Again, the big fisherman had only cold feet. If I could only see him alive again, I would plead, Father, forgive this old Peter, this old crumbled rock, this coward who only had cold feet. Maybe Jesus will live again. Maybe this is what he meant when he said, on the third day I will rise again. Surely he will. Surely he must. Otherwise, Peter is no rock, but only so much crumbled dust. The disciple with a big mouth, but with cold feet. All talk and no go. But if Jesus does live again, surely he will forgive me. Surely things can be different. Surely then I can be strong and no longer the disciple with cold feet.